How's that look for you? Is that coming through good and clear now?
Looks good, Roy.
Okay, great. Okay, what is PERP? PERP is a public employee protection program. Prior to 1970, no workers had any protections for occupational hazards. And in 1994, PERP was developed and expanded to include all governmental employees within the state of Ohio. We apply OSHA standards to public employers and apply the rules and regulations of the Ohio Administrative Code and Ohio Revised Code in section 4167 to public employers. We cover everyone to include firefighters now, except the only employees we do not cover is OPATA certified peace officers doing peace officer work. So our purpose is to ensure that public employees have a safe place and healthy place to work as required by the Ohio Revised Code. What PERP does is we'll go in, we identify hazards, we enforce mandatory job and safety and health regulations. We monitor and maintain a record-keeping system for Ohio public employers. And we do additional training. We do program reviews, compliance assistance. Unfortunately, of late, we're doing a lot more injury investigations and fatality investigations than we care to mention. We'll cover that later on in the presentation a little bit. So Ohio Revised Code 416702 has recently been revised, 2019, I believe, and developed a safety partnership agreement program. What that is, it looks at employer safety programs and processes and takes them and reviews them. They have to agree to PERP inspections. And what it does for them is it sets them on a path to having excellent safety program for their employees to reduce their injuries. Because anytime you have an injury or anything like that, it really hurts the morale, it hurts the injured employee, and all those things like that. So, and it also excludes the participants from general scheduled inspections, or as we call them, scheduled visits. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a moment. There we go. Okay, to participate in a safety partnership agreement, they have to have an active workers' compensation policy, an illness history that's less than the industry norm. For each industry, there's a expected rate of injuries, and they would need to be below that expected rate of injuries. Definitely need to have a safety committee, which is an excellent tool for any employer because it's a ground up operation that needs significant managerial support to make the workplace much safer. They can't have any open or unresolved enforcement actions. And then, like I said before, agree to comprehensive employment risk reduction inspection. Now, one of the new amendments that came out in 2019 was the 416710. It's scheduled inspections. We call them Focus 4 because it focuses in on a lot of your high hazard activities. Trenching and excavation, permit required confined space work zone work, any work out in the roadway, and tree work, as these are some of our leading job tests that end up in fatalities or significant injuries. So anytime we drive by, if I'm driving my car past because we roam the entire state of Ohio, there's currently 5 of us for the state of Ohio, and Ryan Towns and I cover the Northwest Ohio section. If we're driving past a work zone, we're required to stop, make contact with the employees there, and the supervisor, how they're doing their business, review what they're doing. Recently made contact on a trenching and excavation site. They were doing everything right. That's what we want to see. And, you know, they meet all the elements of running a safe operation. Tree work's another significant area. We recently had a fatality for tree work. We've had numerous chainsaw incidents. You know, go buy the chaps. Make sure your folks are wearing chaps, safety glasses, all that required equipment. In addition to these focus 4 areas, we typically hit record keeping. We look at record keeping to ensure it's being done properly. Job hazard assessment, which covers how hazardous a job is, as well as a PPE assessment, personal protective equipment, because those two things go hand in hand. And then we do hazardous communications. What chemicals or what hazardous chemicals are we using at the work site that could cause some injuries for our employees? And that's something that's typically not done either. So we work with best employees we can, or employers, to make sure they have their systems up where they need to be. Okay, as we talked, what is enforced is elements of the Public Employee Risk Reduction Act, federal OSHA standards, and Chapter 4167 of the Ohio Administrative Code and Revised Code. Anytime you're looking at standards, if you crack open an OSHA book and it's, about 2.5 inches thick, Bible print, and there's a lot of stuff there. Anytime you see the word shall or must, that means you have to do it. There's really no choice. If it should or may, then those are things that are a best practice, if you would. When you look at the Ohio Revised Code, or I'm sorry, the Ohio Administrative Code regarding work in the roadway, because that's where we go for that, they have the same type of standards in the OMUTCD, and that's the reference document for that is the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And they have the same system of shall and must, and then they have things that are required as in bold print. Things that are not required are in just standard print. So a lot of times we'll come across things where, not a lot, but occasionally we run across things where there is no direct standard that applies to it, because there's many tasks out there that OSHA has not covered through legislative action, and that's how OSHA rules become laws. Whereas we assign a general duty clause, and it can only be utilized for serious hazards when there's no standard that applies, and we cannot impose a stricter requirement on someone than's required by a standard, and we can't use it for best practices. So when we go and look at things, general duty clause, a great example would be if you have a public works or a service garage and they make their own gantry crane, and it's just something Bob cobbled together, we would cite them on utilizing that, not being an engineered device, and our supporting documentation would be the American National Standards Institute guide on that, and that's incorporated by reference. And that gets a little bit deeper than we need to go here, but that's how we would apply it. We have to apply it in good faith and for serious things. So if you're lifting up a 1-ton motor, that's pretty serious hazard. Okay, employers and employees have responsibilities. The Ohio Revised Code says that each employer in Ohio must provide a place of employment free from recognized hazards. Now, also, each public employee themselves must comply with all safety and health regulations and any reasonable safety and health policies developed by their employer. So we're going to go to the Ohio data portal here, and this should take a moment. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Should say Data Ohio.
Do not see Data Ohio. I see your
Okay.
slash.
Okay. How's that look for you?
Yep, there it is.
Awesome. Okay, this is a new tool that rolled out a couple months ago. Very useful. We're still learning it as well. And it covers more than just perp stuff. This is a transparency tool State of Ohio has developed for public employers. And I'm going to kind of scroll through it here. And it has some COVID-19 information. Yeah, stuff goes into Ohio fish stocking records. And it's a data collection portal. So it has various links you can go to, and for our purposes, and this is something great tool to kind of exploit. We're going to go to perp. So we're just going to type in here perp. And what we're going to do is look at the most commonly cited standards. And you have to hit the find data button. You can't just hit the return. Okay. Then your results come up down here towards the bottom. And this will be we'll go ahead and do the data portal first, then we'll come back and watch a video on an enforcement procedure. Okay, this is where you'll go to on the Data Ohio Public Employment Risk Reduction Program, and it focuses in primarily at this point on frequently cited standards. So you'll need to go from the details to the visualize block. Can you see my cursor here for visualize?
Yes.
Okay, so you click on visualize, and what that does is it'll bring up this picture of the state of Ohio. And I'm sorry for shifting my screen around so much, but you'll see over here on the left, or I'm sorry, on the right, we'll start at the top. If we want to narrow down our citation date range, as you can see up here in the upper left, it goes from 2016 to 2022. So if we want to just close that down a little bit, we can just grab this little guy here and then pull him this direction, and we'll go from late 2018 to 2022. And now it'll resort all these values. And as you can see on this map here, that's where citations were issued for public employers only in the specific counties. Now you'll notice Franklin County has 673. That's because a lot of state agencies feed in through and out of Franklin County. The same with some of these higher number areas. But just based on that date range there, and we're currently selected on all counties. We can do a sort, just uncheck everything just by clicking it, and then we could check whatever counties we want specifically. Another way of doing that is actually clicking on the county and holding your control button, and then you can load up what counties you actually want to look at. So if we want to only look at Fulton County, we can click Fulton County and it's going to do its thinking. And this is what was cited in Fulton County. It has 29 items. The number one was 1910-1200E, which is hazardous communications, one of our focus for. 29B is walking working standard. And you roll into 38 is, I believe, fire standards, just pulling off the top of my head. 106 is fuels. And 119, I'm not sure of right off the top of my head, so I apologize. So now we just click on that same one again, and it'll reload all that same data. So throughout the state of Ohio, general duty clause is the #1 issued, because as public employers, the folks that work for public employers, we're expected to do a whole range of tasks. And that's how we get there. If we're citing stuff for road work from the Ohio Revised Code, then we cite through the general duty clause. So if they don't have their work zone set up properly, they don't have a shadow vehicle on a mobile work zone, any of those things, then that is where that would be cited. 303B2 is an electrical standard. A lot of times it's 303B2 is using electrical items out of their designed use. So if you take multiple power taps and plug them into each other, daisy chain them, or if you're running a toaster or a microwave or refrigerator, coffee pot, through powering it through the use of a power tap, that's against how it was designed to be used. And that's a typical citation for power taps, is 303B2. Then we come back to HAZCOM. So it'll give you the list here. And what's nice is, if I can get it to do it, let me see here. Awesome. Okay, I have to shift screens around, so please bear with me. Okay, so we have to shift our screen over because there's more data over here. And so that's set up for the number 20. So the top 20, if we wanted to increase that to 25, we could just say, I want the top 25 items. And then it'll do a search and it'll sort everything. And that you can just hit your return and it'll work there. I know I say return, I'm telling my age because I learned to type on typewriters. So it'll give you that, and sometimes there'll be a change in the sort, and then you just scroll down here. 146C1, that is not identifying your permit required confined spaces. Hearing dosimetry is 95D1, is a hearing protection program. So it's a pretty good extensive list. So you can sort, or you can also sort by the actual standard. So whatever standard you want to check, you can check on there, and it'll bring that up and how many times it was actually put forward. So it's a real handy tool, kind of keep track on what's going on. As you can see, we do a lot of work with cities. No, it's not scrolling for me, so okay. So we're going to go ahead and step back now. We'll go back a couple screens, and then I'll try and play that video. Please let me know if you can hear the audio. Okay, and what this here is going to do, it's going to link us through our internet web page from Ohio BWC. And it'll take you to the PERP web page. And then there's a wonderful video the City of Columbus helped us develop. And I'm gonna go ahead and play it. Hopefully everyone can hear the... Do we have audio?
Yes.
Awesome.
PERP's mission is to ensure public employees have a safe and healthful work environment. PERP conducts scheduled inspections that focus on high-risk employers and high-hazard work activities. They also perform investigations based on imminent danger situations such as worker fatalities, hospitalizations, amputations, loss of an eye, worker complaints, and refusal to work. Enforcement plays a vital role in the efforts to reduce workplace injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. This video describes the general PERP inspection process and the reasons for an inspection or investigation. Compliance safety and health officers are experienced, well-trained industrial hygienists and safety professionals. Once the compliance officer arrives on site and enters the employer's work site, the inspection begins with the presentation of credentials. There are 4 basic parts to any PERP inspection or investigation: opening conference, walk-around, employee and/or management interviews, and a closing conference. During the opening conference, the compliance officer will explain why PERP is inspecting the workplace and describe the scope of the inspection, the walk-around procedures, worker representation, and the need for worker and/or management interviews. The employer is asked to select a representative to accompany the compliance officer throughout the inspection. During the walk-around, the compliance officer will identify hazards, inspect equipment, take pictures, video, and/or create diagrams, ask representatives questions, and privately interview individual workers. More private interviews could be scheduled later. Common questions during interviews include: how long have you worked for the employer? Have you or anyone else been injured or had close calls on the job? Does the employer provide personal protective equipment? How often does the employer provide training? What is the training composed of? After interviews are conducted and follow-up visits completed, the compliance officer holds a closing conference with the employer and may invite designated employee representatives to discuss the findings, identify possible corrective procedures, and reasonable timelines for correction. The compliance officer also discusses potential courses of action an employer may take following an inspection or investigation, as well as available consultation services. Following the PERP inspection or investigation, the compliance officer will put together a report based on what was discussed and/or apparent violations. The information is sent to the director and manager of compliance programs to determine if citations are issued. If a citation is issued, the violation notice and citations must remain posted until the employer corrects all alleged violations, or for 3 working days, whichever period is longer. The employer must provide abatement verification by the abatement date. The abatement verification report must remain posted until violations are corrected or for 6 calendar days, whichever is later. Other employer actions: the employer has 14 days from the receipt of the citations to request an informal conference with the director and/or request a notice of contest. A safe workplace will help everyone. PERP uses enforcement and compliance assistance to achieve this shared goal. Ensuring compliance with OSHA and/or PERP standards is an integral part of the agency's mission to keep workers safe and healthy. That's why PERP is working to give employers the knowledge and tools they need to comply and provide safety information to workers. For more information about PERP inspections and compliance assistance resources, please visit bwc.ohio.gov and click on Safety and Training, or call 800-671-6858. This video and content are not a standard or regulation.
Okay, we'll get back to our slideshow presentation and make sure it's popping up for us here. Okay, can everyone see most common violations Ohio data portal?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I thought that video did a really nice job talking about the enforcement process and everything it's required. As you know, public employers in the state of Ohio are not covered by OSHA. They are covered by PERP, and the correct posters posted are on your left there. It is downloadable from the Ohio BWC website, or you can request one from perprequest@ohio.gov, and we can get you a very nice one sent out. Significant injury reporting. This has been a thing. It has been somewhat of an issue in the past 3 years. Every employer is required to report a fatality within 8 hours of the incident of the time they become aware of the actual fatality. A significant employee injury that results in an inpatient hospitalization for medical treatment, we need to be notified within 24 hours. Now, the old standard was 3 employees. It is now 1 employee for the significant employee injuries. And you would dial the 1-800-671-6858, and that rings in it to our PERP hotline. And that number can also be found on your PERP poster. Okay, record keeping forms. I don't know how many folks do this. Your record keeping system should consist of 3 items. You need a injury incident report. You need a way to track recordable injuries, and then you need a summary. So the first document we're looking at is a injury incident report. If a locality has their own injury incident report, that is fine, as long as, and this is what gets most folks, it is equivalent to the PERP 301P. So in other words, it must contain, at a minimum, the data fields on the 301P. So one typically that is forgotten is number 20. I know it's hard to see, you probably can't see it. Is if the employee died, when did the death occur? That needs to be on your form to be equivalent. Excuse me. The second form we talked about was a log of injuries, and on this log it'll have your case number. And this is a PERP 300P. Once again, you can have your own as long as it contains all these data fields. And then you'll have narrative information here. This group here, can you see my cursor okay?
Yes.
There should be 1 X on this line, whichever applies, the worst case. If they are out of work, days away from work or on job restriction, a numerical value will go in here. I'm sorry. A numerical value will go in there. And then over here, it should be 1 X on what type of injury applies. There is a PERP record keeping program. It's based on Excel. It's a very nice sheet. As someone that took care of this at the penitentiary I worked at, it is very time saving. And that can be acquired through, it's on our website, or you can contact PERP request at ohio.gov. So this is your 300 AP. It's your summary of injuries. What's submitted typically, and this is generalities, this is what's submitted to PERP via electronic format. It's much easier for us, and it's easier for you. Each establishment should have their own 300 AP that applies to that establishment. So if you have a water treatment plant, a wastewater treatment plant, and a services building, each one of those will have their own 300 AP signed by the highest ranking individual at that facility or location. And then what is submitted is a combined 300 AP. Now, counties have a different structure on that. State agencies, there's some ins and outs to that. So retention updating, retain forms for 5 years plus the year you're in. So it's the current year plus 5 years. The only thing that gets updated during that 5-year period is your 300P log, which is your days away from work, what have you. It's not necessary to update the other forms. Employees, former employees, employee representatives, and representative of the superintendent, which would be a compliance officer, shall have open access to these records, their own records, of course, the 300P log, the 300 AP. and a 301P or an employer injury illness form for their injury. Our inspection priorities are refusal to work. In other words, an employee sees an imminent danger. So if I do this task, there is a very good likelihood that I could be killed or seriously injured on this task. Hey, Bob, go down in the trench that's 15 feet deep, 2 feet wide, and 30 feet long, and just go ahead and grab that wrench that's down there, and then we'll pull you back out. So that's something where he said, no, I'm not going to do that. Of course, fatalities, hospitalizations are next priority, and then complaints. Employee has a complaint, a safety complaint about an employer. They can file paperwork through Ohio BWC's PERP's website and by calling us, and we'll look into the complaint. Next priority is general schedule inspections, which is the focus 4 we spoke about. And then compliance assistance is what we really like doing, coming out, because it's a proactive thing where we're getting to an employer before an incident happens. And all these are included with your premium, so there's no extra cost to it. So discrimination retaliation is if an employee submits a complaint or refusal to work, the employer shall not discriminate or retaliate against that employee. So we've talked about scheduled inspections already, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on this. And then we've talked about common violations. This is what a violation notice looks like. You'll have a notice that'll explain employer's rights. And then there's the actual, what a citation would look like in the condition it gives, what the actual standard is that applies. As we said before, we don't enforce things that are best practices. We can't enforce something to a stricter standard. So this is the actual language of the law. And the findings is the condition of what we seen or how when we came out to investigate what we seen on that day, not anything afterwards. So if there's corrective action afterwards, we may issue a cease and desist. In other words, stop doing what you're doing because you do not have the training, the tools, or the experience to do such a task. We may issue that, but the findings is what we see. And then typically we'll put in an abatement note, which says, hey, this is the best way you can take care of it. And being on your side of the desk as a safety guy, dealing with budgets and everything else, we're going to do our best to lead you down the most economical, but yet most effective way to handle something. Because if it's not effective, it's not a very good process. Okay, then failure to comply. If someone does not comply with a PERP violation notice, then they can be fined at that point, because if we issue citations, there is no monetary penalty fee. What we want that money to go for is to repair the situation, make it right, so it's a safe workplace. So if an employer refuses to do that, it can go to a county court in the county that the citations were issued, or to the Court of Common Pleas in Franklin County, where they'll go through. And it's $500 a day per citation, not to exceed $10,000. But in all the years of PERP, we've not got to that point ever, because typically, we don't ask for things that's off the wall crazy to get fixed. Okay, PERP compliance assistance. These are things we do to help out employers as part of your program policy. We come out and we do safety inspections. I personally like doing safety walkthroughs. When I work for the prison system, we would go out and we would audit each other's prisons. And you go through and you look for things that kind of jump out at you. As you can see in the pictures here, we still see containers labeled like you do on the left. Fortunately, we don't see a whole lot of trenching and excavation like you do on the upper right. We still see electrical conditions like on the lower right there. And then ergonomic issues is in the center. So We'll go through, we do health inspections. We have industrial hygienists, Ryan Towns and Kim Mitchum. They come out and they'll do noise surveys. Noise surveys are a big thing when running lawnmowers, any noisy equipment, backpack blowers, chippers, extremely loud. So they can come out and do these, this noise dosimetry. They can do some air monitoring, looking for contaminants, and then chemical hygiene. And then our voluntary inspection reports, we'll come out, we'll take lots of pictures and generate a report for you. And then corrective action needs to be submitted back to us within 90 days, or at least a plan for corrective action. Because I know we all get that sometimes budgets doesn't allow for everything right up front, or that training class that's necessary won't be held for another 30 or 60 days after the 90 days. We understand that because our end goal is a safer workplace for Ohio employees, public employees. Okay, and safety program reviews is another thing we do. A lot of folks they'll draft a safety program and make it for an entire city. There still has to be site-specific requirements. A lot of times we'll see no program, incomplete programs, or not site-specific. Site-specific is a huge thing. BWC does offer written safety program templates. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. They're out there and they're based upon the requirements of the standard. You can get those from Ohio BWC's website. Just type in their sample written safety programs and they'll give you a template. Everything in red is employer specific information. There's helps on the right side of the page. And those are very well thought out. That's one of the things we did during COVID is they put together separate teams to go through these policies and these written programs that are required and develop them so it's an aid to employers, because we see a lot of these, it's never done. Very good tool. So we come out and we do training on site where we have in the past done actual trench dig training where they actually dig a trench and we talk about sloping and benching and all the required elements. Employers need to be familiar with their safety equipment like shielding and the shoring that goes along with trenching. So we'll come out and do training. We do record keeping training. We're doing a lot more virtual stuff nowadays though. And then these are those compliance services. Those can be requested through the telephone at 1-800-671-6858 or by per request at BWC, or I'm sorry, at ohio.gov. Changed email addresses recently. And then this is our contact information. If you want to take a screenshot, just hold your Windows key and hit print screen. It'll make a screenshot of this. Then that way you can get in contact with us. So that's what I have. Do I have any questions out there?
Thank you, Roy. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but we've got about 15 minutes left. So if anyone has anything for Roy, I'd be more than happy to share that with him.
Okay, and something I can talk about real quick here since we do have some time. For those folks that do lawn mowing, this has become a very, very bad issue of late. As lawnmowers overturning, employees getting significantly injured.